We caught up with Brian Baumgartner. He is the actor Kevin from The Office, host and executive producer of An Oral History of The Office podcast, and you can find that on Spotify. I started the interview by asking Brian, how are you, Brian?
Dan, I could not be prouder of myself. Okay, let me be very clear about this. You know, we just finished the American Century Championships up here in Lake Tahoe.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard.
I did hear. You didn't win.
30th place, though. Top half of the field with elite athletes all around me. I was very proud of myself.
Okay. Who did you play with?
I played, well, the first day they like to put, let's just say, the jokers together. So I had Larry the Cable Guy and John O'Hurley from Seinfeld. But I made positive numbers every day. The second day I played with Adam Thielen and Aaron Rodgers. And the third day, Mr. Rogers and AJ Hawk.
How was Aaron Rodgers?
He played great.
I know, but chatting, is he an Office fan?
Well, yeah, we're old friends. We've discussed this before. I met him in 2008 here. I am still in Lake Tahoe, beautiful Lake Tahoe. I met him at a blackjack table here in 2008. He was a fan of The Office, and I had no clue who he was. No, not one clue. This was right before he was the starter. He started in fall of 2008. And so we started talking. I mean, once he said his name, I was like, oh yeah, the Cal guy. Good luck behind Favre. And we became friends then. And yeah, we've been friends ever since. So it's always fun to come up here and be able to play with him.
Spotify and Brian Baumgartner have teamed up to create a new limited series podcast, An Oral History of The Office. So Brian, host, executive producer. Is there a story that's off limits that pertains to The Office for the podcast?
You mean that I won't tell you, or that we didn't tell in the podcast?
Touchy to deal with. How about that? Is there a sensitive episode of The Office?
Yes. So I'll tell you two things. One is that I lived through this thing, and though my character on the show was not the most intelligent character on the show, I actually was paying attention throughout. And the business of television and entertainment is interesting to me, so I was paying attention. But listen, I sat down with all of the key assets for this thing. I have over 100 hours of recorded material. Like, my drop the mic moment, or, saying is basically Steve Carell didn't talk about The Office, hasn't talked about The Office for more than 5 minutes since, he was off the show 9 years ago. And we sat down for 3.5 hours and just talked through everything. And I learned myself, because people are like, oh, The Office, everybody knows everything. I learned like big, huge, significant things as I was going through this podcast that I think people were too humble or too protective of other people to tell when it was going on.
Like what? Like what?
Well, I mean, Dan, I'm not going to give you all of my information, but I'll The Office. In 2008, there was a writer's strike, which I'm sure those of you who remember, it was 100 days. Everything was shut down. And The Office had a very significant role in that shutdown. There are stories around what happened there and key people that were involved in The Office taking care of our crew who was out of work for 100 days. Stories around that I had never, ever heard. And I think there's a lot of exploration for people who don't know early on. As Dan, I know the show was almost canceled for like the first 2 years. We were dead on arrival. Like, it was not moving forward. And the bold choices, the brave choices that got people fired because they believed in the show, that enabled The Office to continue into seasons 3 through 9, basically. We go through in pretty intricate detail what happened there, and I think it will be interesting for people, particularly the young people now who have become such fans of the show, that think the show just always existed on Netflix, right? Like people don't realize, like a lot of the young viewers don't realize, like, what is NBC? Why? What is that?
But how close do you think? Was there a day where you thought this is it? They're going to cancel?
100%. I was sitting, actually, name drop. I was sitting in a trailer, Steve Carell's trailer with Steve Carell and Rainn Wilson and myself, the three of us in there. We came back for this. We did 6 episodes in season 1, and we were given, the network didn't even tell people we were only given 6 episodes in season 2. Like they were like, oh no, they're coming back. And then they were like, yeah, you can do 6 and then goodbye. We filmed those in the summer, and then we finished before any of them started airing. And we were sitting in the trailer, and Steve said, well, at least we got to do 12. At least we can be proud of doing 12. And we went away, and Angela Kinsey tells the story. She took her nameplate off of her trailer, like as a memento. She was like, we're never coming back. And then, one of the episodes of the podcast, we go through, like, the episode in the podcast is called A Billion Things Have to Go Right. And every single thing in that second season went right. And at the end of the second season, we won the Emmy. And from there, it was full steam ahead.
It's an oral history of The Office podcast with your host and executive producer, Kevin from The Office, Brian Baumgartner. And you can see it, or listen to it, I should say, on Spotify. But I wonder if the writing changed when you weren't even sure if you were going to be brought back. Like, did it get a little bit more, hey, who cares? Let's take some risk. Did you ever feel that way? Like, you guys started out of the gate with the diversity episode, which to me, like, that's episode 2, Brian. You usually build up to diversity where you have a little bit of house credit to be able to do that.
That you could have worked with me on the podcast. Some of what you just said is the narration, like, of what I say in the podcast, like, because there are a lot of people who say, in retrospect, oh, The Office started slowly and it built. And I'm like, go look at episode 2 and what was happening. And that episode, Dan, I'll tell you that I remember sitting there in that conference room, which we were in like 14 hours a day that week, and saying, like, man, if people give this show a chance, what we're talking about, people don't talk about this on network television. I mean, we're looking at race in a really frank way. But one of my favorite exchanges to me, which is like, this is so cheap, but like quintessential Office, is Michael Scott turning in Diversity Day and turning to Oscar and saying, in a real genuine way, what is less offensive to call you than Mexican? And Oscar saying, what? There's nothing offensive about Mexican. Right. But like, what's something less offensive? And to me, that encapsulates it, right? Like, he's trying to do good. He's not misintentioned. And the response from everybody else who's in the room is like, oh, don't do that. So the message of the show is, you can't do that. You can't say that. But now we're not even allowed to make that joke.
Yeah.
That's how people are. Like, that's reality. And I think that one of the things that I've found through this show is, we were looking at and talking to Greg Daniels, who created it, and Ken Kwapis, who directed some of the early episodes. They were really looking for an ultra reality, right? And one of the things, this is meta and kind of deep for your listeners, Dan, I'm going to be honest with you about that. But
thank you, Brian.
But I'm a listener. See, that's the joke. That you think we need to make this universal, right? So we need to generalize things, right? Because the more general you make it, the more people can understand it. But I think what The Office did, and one of the things that has made it endure to today, is everything was ultra specific, like very specific. And that ultimately, my theory is the more specific you get, actually, the more universal it becomes.
Did John Krasinski wear a wig any of the
Yes.
seasons? He did.
Yes, and this is a new spoiler thing that has come out recently that I always thought, well, didn't everybody know that? It looked ridiculous. He was in, he wore it, he did the movie with Clooney, Leatherheads.
Yeah.
When he did Leatherheads, and they had the short hair because it was a period piece. Don't ask me when exactly, I don't know. But, like it was, so they had short hair, and he had the like floppy do, and where they were like, oh, we can't let Jim not have his sexy floppy do. So they put a wig on him. But I thought it looked ridiculous.
Coming from a guy who looked ridiculous when you wore your hairpiece.
Yeah, I thought it was. I feel like I should bring it back, Dan.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I should bring it
and
back.
The Kleenex boxes on the feet.
I will tell you, though, the craziest thing is, well, I mean, you know this. I can't walk down the street and not have somebody yell chili at me. Like, that is just a thing. Right? That one, it's like we did 200 and whatever episodes. That's
How
it.
do you not have a chili sponsor like Hormel or something?
Oh, you haven't heard? Dan, let me tell you a little something about Bush's beans.
Oh.
Yeah, check it out.
You're Mr. Bush's beans?
No, I think they have a dog.
They do have a dog.
Yeah, but I know. There was I did a campaign with them right before the pandemic. We did kind of a spoof on it, and I posted it on Twitter, and I don't know, there's now like 30 million views of this. I mean, it just like went crazy.
Oh, hey, I saw is Billie Eilish on this?
I talked to Billie Eilish during the podcast.
Okay, explain how Billie Eilish ends up on the Office podcast.
Well, so my time frame is a little weird, but like right before you, I think, and me knew who she was, I got approached through my management that this woman, Billie Eilish, wanted to use my voice in one of her songs. She was a big Office fan. And there was a number of the cast that had been approached about this. And I was like, what? I don't know. Then I literally said, well, if Steve says yes, then fine. Like, whatever. Like, I don't know what this is. If you get Carell to say yes, then sure, I'll do it. And so, sure enough, like, I don't know, 1 week later, I'm listening to the radio and I'm like, Billie Eilish, who's Billie Eilish? Oh, yeah, this is the person who's used my voice. So she blew up. One of her songs on her album is called My Strange Addiction. And her strange addiction is The Office. And throughout the song, she uses clips of a number of our voices in her song. She's so great. She's so smart. And yeah, she loves the show. She has the show on all the time. And she talked to me about, what the show means to her and why she became such a big fan of the show and why she had to ultimately write a song and use our voices in it. Crazy.
Congrats on it. I'm not surprised it's a hit. The Oral History of The Office it's on Spotify with Brian teaming up to create this limited series podcast. I wish you well with it and hope you're doing well. Hopefully we'll see you in person.
I would love that soon, Dan. Be well, be healthy, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, thanks.
The Oral History of The Office podcast available on Spotify. Brian Baumgartner, he played Kevin on The Office.